This is the daily fiscal pulse for the 17th of April, 2026. What you're hearing today is Friday's data, which means these are final settled numbers rather than preliminary estimates. Let's start with the macro backdrop because it shapes everything else. The Iran and Middle East situation continues to dominate headlines. Meanwhile, comments from Fed Chair nominee Kevin Warsh about the Fed needing to stay in its lane to preserve independence are resonating through the markets. These narratives matter, sure, but the real question is what the actual flows are doing beneath the surface. The net fiscal transfer for the session came in at $42.9 billion. That number by itself suggests stability. The real tell though is the shorter-term momentum. Your 5-day average has compressed to roughly half of what we saw in earlier periods. Tax receipts are the main contributor here, sitting at $57.0 billion. The index paints a somewhat different picture. ES futures ended the day at 7,162, maintaining its position above the 20-day moving average of 6,735. When you measure the full 20-day range, you get roughly 826 points. So despite fiscal headwinds, price action is holding its ground. Pulling back to a wider timeframe clarifies what's happening. Government spending on a 5-day basis is averaging $65.0 billion daily. Now compare that to the 20-day average at $10.0 billion. That gap shows a clear deceleration. Less cash is being injected into the system, flowing down through households and eventually into financial markets. The result is tighter financial conditions overall. The year-over-year lens reinforces this same narrative. Fiscal year-to-date spending stands at $763.4 billion, running approximately 9% behind the comparable period from 12 months ago. That represents a substantial reduction in fiscal tailwinds, and it carries real implications for system liquidity. From a bullish perspective, this fiscal backdrop deserves attention. The tailwind simply isn't there right now. Our conditions index is currently reading -62. That said, historical context matters. We've navigated similar terrain before, and the S&P has managed to deliver around plus 1.0% average returns over the following month despite thinner liquidity conditions. Markets and fiscal flows don't move in lockstep. Here's where things come together. Below average fiscal flows relative to last year mean the system has less of a cushion. When positive news flows, markets can grind higher. But when a risk event surfaces, like an escalation in Iran and the Middle East, the downside can accelerate faster because there's simply less liquidity sitting underneath to cushion the fall. There are scheduled flows ahead that could alter the trajectory. The 22nd of April brings the SSA payment cycle, the fourth Wednesday of the month, which typically reshapes short-term flow patterns. Back on the 15th of April, the individual income tax deadline occurred, and that represents the single largest reserve drain event we see across the entire calendar year. The data clearly shows fiscal drag is present. That said, the speed of tightening may be starting to stabilize. What comes next probably hinges on how these scheduled flows actually materialize. That's where our focus is right now.